Perhaps you could tell us about your earliest days in Edinburgh, Captain Brown.
Well, when I was a youngster here, we had a house in Cambridge Gardens, down in Leith, and I went to a little primary school called Lawn Street. And I won a bursary there to the Royal High School. From there, I decided I'd move on to university. And I chose to do modern languages, German and French, but German is my primary language. I was doing an honours degree, which is 4 years, and after the end of the second year, we were visited by the Foreign Office, and they were seeking for bright young things to join organisations such as the Diplomatic Corps. And I said I was interested, and they said, right, that will mean 6 months in Germany and 6 months in France. And this was 1939, and getting near the war, of course. And in the summer of 1939, I moved over to Germany to teach English in a boarding school on Lake Constance. And I was teaching 17, 18-year-olds English. The sad thing was, after the war, I made it my job to try and contact my pupils that I had at Zalem, in this boarding school. And there were 18 of them, and I found 17 had been killed in the war, and the one survivor had one leg only. And it puts in perspective the terrible price Germany paid for the war.
What were your memories of Edinburgh University at that time before you went to Germany?
Oh, university life was fantastic, and I loved every minute of it. If you were going to do well, you had to study hard, and that restricted your free time, probably kept you out of trouble, and generally, I couldn't have been happier with life when I was here.
You mentioned that you graduated in 1947. That sounds like quite a commitment.
Oh, it was, yes. I was very keen to. I thought, what a pity going to a university and not coming out with an end result. And that's really what kept me going. And the fact that the old staff I knew was still there and was still so keen to help me. They went out of their way. There were three of them, Professor Bruford, Mr. Egling, and a lovely lady called Estelle McElvenna. And they all helped me through that period. Estelle McElvenna sent me books and said, read them. And then Egling would send me actual exam papers to complete and see if I was up and running at that stage. And as I said, they just nurtured me along. And you know, you don't expect this after you've left a university.
What are your memories of post-war Germany, just at the very end of the war?
To be honest with you, it was like being on the moon. The destruction, the scale of the destruction was incredible. Any major city, or even pretty big city, was in total ruin. I mean, not just damaged, total ruin. And people were wandering around like zombies, lost human beings. Just immediately after, when the capitulation was declared, there were just thousands of Germans trying to find their way home to their own original town, and if it existed. Winston Churchill had given us 3 priorities to do. One was firstly to capture the German supersonic wind tunnels, then find their advanced jet aircraft and their advanced rocket aircraft, bring home examples of those, test them. Finally, find their top scientists and interrogate them and bring them back. And I brought help to bring back 26 of the top scientists.
And I believe you're involved in Nuremberg?
And interrogated Himmler, well, not a lot. Mainly identification of him, but had a good chance to have a go at Goering. Another wonderful one was Werner von Braun, who is the most incredible, one of the most incredible men I've ever met. Such self-confidence. This guy, in the middle of a war, he wasn't captured, he gave himself up. And when he did, he said to the Americans, "Aren't you the lucky ones to have me, because I'm going to take you to the moon?" Talk about self-confidence. This was the sort of guy he was. In everything he touched, he was like this. He wanted to be a pilot, took him 2.5 hours to go solo.
Could you maybe just tell us a little bit about where your career took you at that time?
Yes. Well, after the war, I was still at that time the chief naval test pilot at Farnborough when the war ended. But some of the other companies were also trying to get me to join them. And Farnborough wouldn't have any of this because I was involved in some top secret work. And they said, "Oh no, we can't let you go, you've got to stay on." And I said, "Well, you've got to give me a job to stay on." So the Navy said, "Right, we'll give them a commission." And so that's why I stayed on as a naval pilot. And when my flight testing days were done, I just became an ordinary squadron pilot.
You were back at Edinburgh in 2007 to get an honorary degree. What are your memories of that day?
Wonderful. My best fond friend after the war was Neil Armstrong, the astronaut. We knew each other for about 30 odd years. And we used to lecture quite a bit together. And Neil, I found out that his background was being a good Armstrong. He came from the Borders, and the family came from Langham, which is just down the road from Melrose. And so that was partly the reason we became great friends. And when I heard that we were both to be made or offered doctorships, we decided we'd do it together. But Neil's commitments wouldn't allow that. And he was very disappointed, but to his surprise, the Edinburgh Council said, "Right, we'll come over to America and do the honours there."
Hearty congratulations.
Tell us a little bit more about your relationship with Neil Armstrong, how you first got to meet one another.
Yes, well, Neil and I were both flying at an airfield called Bedford at lunchtime one day. And I was flying a helicopter, and I needed a quiet airfield to myself because I was doing a special job. And Neil was the only one that was up in the air at the time. And air traffic control said, "Well, we can give you an hour, but then we're having an airplane coming back then, so if you can come back at the same time." So I came back at the end of the hour, and Neil had landed just, I think, ahead of me. And we got in, a Land Rover came to pick us up and take us to mess. And here's the most famous guy on the planet, and I didn't recognize him. And he introduced himself. And of course I thought, "Oh, you fool, this guy, everybody knows him." And he was very nice, and we went to the mess and had lunch together. And during that time, we talked. We never mentioned the moon, either of us. And we talked about the Border Reefers and his ancestry in Langham and all that sort of stuff. And this is what melded us together. We'd both been naval pilots, test pilots, borderers, border reefers. And he said, you know, we're kindred spirits. We must stick together. And that's how it all happened.
Fascinating. You had an incredible career. Would you have liked to have followed in his footsteps and gone into space?
No, I'd prefer to, and incidentally, it's an interesting question. I often asked Neil, would you sooner have been an astronaut or a test pilot? And he said, despite of going to the moon, I'd sooner have been a test pilot.